Captain Maya Cross stepped into the war room the way a soldier steps back onto familiar, hostile ground, quietly, cautiously, taking in every detail before moving farther. The heavy steel door closed behind her, muffling the roar of analysts, officers, and Marines packed into the vast operations chamber. Screens lined every wall, filled with satellite maps, troop positions, encrypted feeds, and scrolling red alerts that pulsed like a heartbeat. She stood still for a moment, brushing the thin layer of desert dust from her sleeve. It didn't fully come off. Sand had a way of settling into the fabric, the pores, the eyes, the soul. She had only been back on American soil for 7 hours, just enough time for a medical check, a debrief nobody listened to, and a quick shower meant to wash away 3 weeks of war. It hadn't worked. Maya squared her shoulders and stepped fully inside. The atmosphere was loud, chaotic, and tense, not unusual for a facility that only activated the war room under extraordinary circumstances. Generals clustered around tables arguing in low, urgent voices. Communications officers sprinted between stations. Marines manned consoles with rigid posture, eyes never leaving their screens. The air smelled of burnt coffee, leather, and stress. But as soon as Maya entered, a few heads turned. Some recognized her face. A few recognized her name. Almost no one recognized her purpose, and that was intentional. She made her way along the back wall, intent on slipping unnoticed toward Admiral Pierce's briefing station. But naturally, someone noticed. Sergeant Ryan Blake. Blake was loud. Blake was arrogant. Blake was the type who believed rank determined value and that value determined volume. And right now, he was the loudest thing in the room. He lounged in a rolling chair, feet propped on the table, tossing a stress ball in the air as if the entire world weren't on the brink of erupting. A grin spread across his face the moment he spotted Maya. "Well, well, look who wandered into the big kid room," Blake announced loudly. A few junior officers glanced toward Maya. Blake's friends were already smirking. Maya didn't react. She spent too many years learning not to. She kept walking, choosing a seat along the periphery. But Blake wasn't done. "You sure you're in the right place, Captain?" he asked, emphasizing Captain with a dramatic flourish. "Because last I checked, this is the war room, not whatever room notes get typed in." A couple Marines snorted under their breath. Maya calmly set her small data folder on the table, unbothered. She'd faced ambushes, detonations, and men far more dangerous than a bored Marine with a loud mouth. Blake leaned toward his fellow NCO, voice intentionally loud. "Hey, relax, folks. She's probably here to bring coffee or take minutes or something." The laughter grew louder, encouraged by his confidence. In a room this tense, any moment of release, even at someone else's expense, caught fire quickly. Maya didn't flinch. She simply sat, eyes scanning the screens, ignoring the stares. But Blake was too entertained to stop. "Captain Cross, right?" he called out, feigning politeness. "What mission were you on? Desk rearrangement, printer repair?" A few officers exchanged uneasy glances. Some found Blake funny, others found him reckless, but no one intervened. Maya finally looked up, not to respond, but because the steel door behind her slid open again. And the laughter died instantly. Admiral Jonathan Pierce walked in. The air shifted the moment he entered. Conversations paused. Officers straightened. Marines snapped to attention. Even the screens seemed to dim slightly, as if recognizing the presence of someone who had commanded fleets, signed deployment orders that shaped global conflicts, and carried secrets locked behind classified clearances most people couldn't even imagine. But the Admiral's eyes weren't scanning the room the way they usually did. He was staring directly at Maya. His expression froze mid-step. A dozen officers followed his gaze, confusion growing. Pierce rarely showed visible emotion, yet something about seeing Maya there startled him. Not fear, not anger. Something sharper. Recognition. Pierce approached slowly, the room falling quieter with each step. Blake's smirk faded as the Admiral passed him without a glance. Pierce stopped directly in front of Maya. "Captain Cross," he said, voice low, controlled and tense. Maya stood and saluted with perfect precision. "Sir." "I wasn't informed you'd returned," Pierce said. The room went dead silent. Blake blinked at the unexpected tone. Several officers exchanged looks. Why would the Admiral address a low-profile captain with such weight? Why would her arrival matter to him? Maya simply nodded once. "Mission complete, sir." Pierce studied her face, as if searching for something. Confirmation she was really there, or maybe a silent question he wasn't ready to voice in public. Then he exhaled slowly, a sound filled with relief, worry, and something deeper. "We need to debrief," he said, "immediately." Whispers rippled through the room. This wasn't normal. Captains didn't receive personal debrief orders from admirals, and admirals didn't sound shaken. Blake leaned toward the Marine beside him. "What, did she find a lost puppy out there?" he muttered with a smirk. But the Admiral, who never reacted to background chatter, heard him. His head snapped around sharply. Blake froze. Pierce stared at him, eyes like steel, expression cold enough to drain the heat from the room. "Sergeant," Pierce said, his voice no longer low but cutting and direct, "you're about to learn exactly what she found." Blake's grin vanished. Officers shifted uncomfortably. Maya looked straight ahead, unreadable. Blake swallowed, realizing too late that whatever he thought he understood about Captain Maya Cross, he was wrong. Very wrong. Pierce turned back to her. "Captain, with me." But before Maya could answer, before Pierce could take a step, before Blake could process how badly he'd misjudged the situation, a security alarm on the wall flickered red, just once. Not loud, not long. Just enough for Maya's eyes to narrow. Just enough for Pierce to tense. Just enough to hint that her return, and the mission she completed, was about to unravel this entire building. And Blake, watching it all, had no idea that his joke was the beginning of something far more dangerous. The war room seemed to shrink around them as Captain Maya Cross followed Admiral Pierce through the maze of consoles and flashing monitors. The tension was palpable. Officers who had been speaking a moment ago now moved silently, sensing that something monumental was about to unfold. Even the hum of electronics seemed subdued, almost respectful of the pair as they approached a private briefing station at the far end of the room. Pierce stopped before a large digital map table, tapping a few buttons. Holographic images flickered to life above the table, showing satellite views of terrain Maya had only just left, with markings that indicated troop movements, enemy positions, and areas classified as high risk. "You've been in this building long enough to know how to use the systems," Pierce said, his tone firm but not cold. "Explain." Maya placed her hands lightly on the edge of the table, studying the imagery. "Sir, during the operation, my team was compromised within the first 48 hours. I completed the objective alone, extracted the primary intelligence, and returned under hostile conditions. Minimal casualties." Pierce raised an eyebrow. "Minimal casualties." "I left no one behind who could have been saved," Maya replied. Her voice was calm, measured, yet it carried the weight of everything she had endured. "Everyone else, we did everything we could." Pierce leaned back slightly, his eyes scanning the displays. His expression softened briefly as he processed her words, but the hardness returned quickly, tempered by the realization that this was far from a routine mission report. Blake, meanwhile, had been dismissed with the rest of the war room personnel, or so he thought. But when he tried to step away, Pierce's sharp voice stopped him. "Sergeant Blake, stay." Blake froze mid-step. He had expected laughter, dismissal, maybe even some light reprimand. But not this. Not the tone Pierce used, calm yet suffused with authority that could crush. Maya didn't glance at Blake. She didn't need to. The tension between them was palpable. For years, she had been trained to read the battlefield, to anticipate threats, and right now, she was acutely aware of the silent danger radiating from the man who had just mocked her in front of the room. Pierce slid a sealed envelope across the table toward Blake. The movement was deliberate, slow, and full of gravitas. Blake hesitated before picking it up, his fingers trembling slightly. The envelope was marked with multiple classifications: top secret, eyes only, restricted access. He opened it, his eyes widened in disbelief. His mouth went dry. The information inside shattered everything he thought he knew. "Impossible," Blake whispered, his voice barely audible. This can't be real." Pierce didn't reply immediately. He merely watched him struggle to comprehend. Then finally, "Everything in that envelope is accurate. She outranks every Marine in this building in operational authority." Blake's head snapped toward Maya. He looked at her, searching for a smirk, a hint that this was some kind of cruel joke. But her expression was unreadable, resolute, impenetrable. "I don't play games, Sergeant," she said quietly. "And mocking rank in a room like this, it's dangerous." Blake's hands shook as he placed the folder back on the table. Sweat had begun to bead along his hairline. For the first time in his career, he felt the weight of a hierarchy he didn't understand, one he had taken for granted. He had believed rank was a marker of experience, authority, status. Now he realized it could be life or death. Pierce turned to the wall console and tapped a few commands, bringing up another feed. A drone's aerial footage from the field Maya had just returned from. It showed a valley littered with enemy fortifications, a compound that had been heavily guarded and nearly impossible to infiltrate. Soldiers could be seen patrolling, vehicles moving in tight formations, and signs of recent combat. "This is where Captain Cross operated," Pierce said. His voice was calm, but there was an edge, a recognition that the reality of what Maya had accomplished might overwhelm anyone unprepared for it. Blake gaped at the screen. She went there alone." Maya's jaw tightened. "Yes, Sergeant, alone. My team was compromised within hours. Extraction failed. I completed the mission." The room's temperature seemed to drop. Blake's smirk had vanished entirely. His colleagues who remained nearby whispered among themselves, some exchanging stunned glances, others simply staring at the holographic display, unable to process what they were seeing. Pierce continued, his eyes never leaving Maya's. She didn't just infiltrate the compound. She recovered intelligence critical enough to prevent an imminent international threat. The intel could have saved thousands of lives, and she did it without support. Blake's breathing grew shallow. The weight of the revelation pressed against him. All those jokes, all that arrogance, all the laughter at her supposed incompetence, it had been utterly misplaced. Maya met his gaze, her own eyes cold and piercing. "The intel wasn't the hardest part," she said softly. Her voice carried a calm authority that cut through the static of Blake's disbelief. The Admiral tapped another console, bringing up grainy footage captured by Maya's body cam. Every officer in the room leaned forward instinctively, drawn by the gravity of what they were about to see. The video showed Maya moving through the rocky terrain under heavy fire, dragging a wounded soldier, someone Blake knew personally, across open ground, bullets striking perilously close. "Ramirez," Blake muttered under his breath, recognizing his friend. Maya narrated the operation quietly. "He begged me to leave him behind. I refused. I carried him to safety while neutralizing threats along the way. The mission would have failed otherwise." The footage ended abruptly, leaving only the echo of gunfire in memory and the haunting sense of danger overcome. Officers exchanged stunned glances. Blake's face had gone pale. He had mocked her. He had judged her. And now he realized the depth of his ignorance. Pierce folded his arms, eyes locked on Maya. "There's more," he said quietly, almost to himself, "and it's classified, for everyone here except her." Blake swallowed hard. His mind was racing, trying to reconcile everything he had assumed about rank, authority, and battlefield courage with the reality before him. Maya's face remained calm, unreadable. Yet the faint lines of exhaustion etched along her cheekbones, the grit in her hair, the subtle tremor in her fingers, details only visible to someone trained to notice, told the story that words could not. Pierce stepped closer to her. "Captain, what we need now is the context. Explain why this operation was never recorded in the official logs. Explain why your return wasn't expected. Explain why Sergeant Blake thought mocking you was safe." Maya's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked down for a fraction of a second before lifting her gaze resolute. "Because I operate where no one else can. Because the mission was deniable. Because my team never existed for public record. And because Sergeant Blake doesn't know what he's talking about." Blake flinched. Every instinct screamed at him to apologize, to retreat, to disappear into the background and pretend he had never said a word. Yet he could not. The sheer weight of awe, fear, and guilt pinned him to the spot. Pierce studied the two of them, then finally nodded, as if confirming some unspoken understanding. "Captain Cross, the war room now belongs to you for the next briefing. Sergeant Blake, I suggest you pay attention. Everything you thought you knew about courage, sacrifice, and authority will be challenged today." The tension hung in the room like a thick fog. Every officer who had remained nearby felt it. Even the air seemed heavier, charged with the electricity of recognition, fear, and uncertainty. Maya straightened, closing the small data folder she had brought with her. She did not glance at Blake again. She didn't need to. Her eyes were fixed on the holographic map, on the real and present dangers it displayed. She had survived deserts, firefights, ambushes, and betrayal. She could survive this. But then, a low warning tone sounded on the main console, a signal so subtle that only trained eyes would notice. A red alert blinked briefly on a corner of the screen. Maya's hand froze over the console. Pierce's head snapped toward the display. The room went silent once more. Blake's mouth opened, but no words came out. Pierce said quietly, "This means someone knows exactly where she was. Someone inside this building." Maya's gaze sharpened, "And they're already watching." Blake's chest tightened. His disbelief had turned to fear. The war room, once a place of calculated strategy, had become the stage for a far more immediate, lethal threat. Pierce reached for the intercom. His eyes never left Maya's. "Seal all entrances," he ordered. "Now." Before anyone could move, a shadow flickered across the observation window, a subtle ripple in the corner of the room, almost imperceptible, but Maya saw it. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Her heart rate increased, though she did not move hastily. Experience told her the moment to panic had passed hours ago. Now action would determine who survived. And as the shadow paused and the red alert blinked again, Blake realized in horror. Every joke he had ever told about Maya Cross, every sarcastic remark in the war room, had placed him in the very path of danger he could not yet even name. Because Captain Maya Cross was not just a Marine. She was the target, the weapon, and the only person standing between life and catastrophe. The war room had transformed from a place of order into a battlefield of unspoken tension. Every eye was fixed on the large holographic table, where satellite imagery and drone feeds flickered with sharp, almost violent clarity. Captain Maya Cross stood at the head of the table, her figure rigid, resolute, every detail of her presence radiating authority. Even the most seasoned officers, those who had commanded fleets and battalions, felt the electric charge in the air. Admiral Pierce tapped a few keys, and the main screen zoomed into the valley where Maya had conducted her operation. The view revealed a hostile compound, high walls topped with razor wire, armed guards patrolling every corner, armored vehicles positioned strategically. To any observer, it was a fortress impossible to breach without substantial backup. Blake's eyes widened, disbelief flooding him. She went in there alone. Maya didn't answer. Her eyes scanned the display as she began her calm narration, voice measured but tense, each word weighted with danger. The mission objective was critical: recover intel that could prevent a coordinated strike against multiple Allied assets in the region. My team was compromised during insertion. Extraction failed. I proceeded alone. The officers murmured. A few gasped quietly. Blake's face drained of color. Pierce folded his arms. Explained the intel recovered, its significance. Maya's eyes narrowed. The intel identified a sleeper cell embedded within local military contractors. It outlined supply chains, weapons caches, and safe houses. Without this data, any strike would have resulted in catastrophic civilian casualties. Extraction wasn't just about me surviving. It was about salvaging intelligence before it was destroyed or captured. Blake's mouth went dry. You're saying you did all of that by yourself? Yes, Maya replied. Her voice was steady, emotion barely visible, yet the adrenaline in her movements betrayed the reality of danger she had faced. Every step, every engagement, every decision solo. I neutralized threats, secured the intel, and extracted. Pierce motioned to a nearby console. A feed appeared showing bodycam footage from Maya's perspective. Dust, smoke, and gunfire blurred the edges, but her actions were crystal clear. She moved through rocky terrain, crouched behind walls, and navigated deadly zones with precision. The camera caught the moment she pulled a wounded soldier, Blake's friend Ramirez, through open fire. Bullets struck dangerously close, the sparks reflecting off walls. Blake leaned forward, recognizing the man. That's Ramirez. Maya's voice was quiet but firm. He begged me to leave him. I refused. Lives cannot be left behind. Mission success means nothing if innocents die. The video cut to static abruptly. The sudden silence echoed in the war room like a physical blow. Officers shifted uncomfortably, the weight of reality pressing down. Blake's hands clenched at his sides. He had mocked her, underestimated her, and now stared at the undeniable proof of her extraordinary courage. Pierce's voice broke the silence. There's more, classified, for everyone except her. He tapped another command, and a new feed appeared. Encrypted communications, intercepted transmissions, and satellite overlays indicating enemy reinforcements that had been neutralized before they could act. The scope of her actions began to become clear. She hadn't merely recovered data. She had dismantled an operational network with precision and foresight. Blake's disbelief hardened into shame. She saved lives more than we ever could have. Maya ignored him, her eyes fixed on the screens, piecing together the full story as she had during the operation itself. Every movement, every threat, every life she saved had required decisions at lightning speed, each with irrevocable consequences. She relived the fear, the adrenaline, the weight of responsibility, not for herself, but for everyone who depended on her actions. Pierce stepped closer, lowering his voice. Captain, this was an unsanctioned operation. Explain why it was never recorded in official logs. Maya's jaw tightened. Sir, the mission was deniable. The intel I recovered had implications for multiple governments and international operations. Any acknowledgement of the operation would have risked escalation and compromise. The details and my team were classified beyond standard channels. In effect, Sergeant Blake, my team, never existed. Blake's hands trembled. So, everything I said, every joke, it was meaningless. Pierce's expression softened slightly, almost imperceptibly. Meaningless and dangerous. Captain Cross is not a name you joke about lightly, Sergeant. The consequences extend far beyond personal ego. Blake swallowed, realizing he had stepped into a room filled with consequences far beyond his understanding. He had mocked someone whose authority, skill, and experience were so advanced that he had no frame of reference. Maya's eyes, still scanning the tactical displays, flicked briefly toward Blake. Jokes are easy, survival is not. The tension in the war room thickened. Officers leaned forward, sensing the gravity of the situation, understanding, finally, the stakes involved. Every detail on the screens, every line in the intelligence brief, every movement of Maya's body cam had painted a vivid story of bravery, resilience, and tactical genius. Pierce's voice cut through the growing whispers. "There is a leak. Someone in this building knows she was in the field, knows she returned, and could compromise operations at any moment." Maya's eyes sharpened. "I suspected as much. I've been trained for this. People watch always. The moment you think it's safe, that's when the enemy strikes." Blake's chest tightened. The war room, a place he had thought was safe, had become a potential death trap. Every joke, every careless remark, every moment he underestimated her placed him, and everyone in the room in immediate danger. Pierce stepped back to the console and tapped another command. Security protocols now. The red warning lights blinked across the room. Doors sealed automatically. Security cameras pivoted, covering every entrance and exit. The room hummed with tension, every officer aware that the next moments could determine survival. A shadow flickered across the observation window. Maya's hand instinctively went to her sidearm, trained reflexes kicking in. Blake froze, realizing she had seen something he hadn't. "She's ready," Pierce said quietly, almost reverently, "and the threat is already inside." Maya's eyes locked on the window. Her breathing was steady, but her entire body was poised, alive with the memory of threats faced in the field. "We move fast or they take advantage. Timing is everything." Blake tried to speak, but words failed him. He was no longer in control. He was no longer the one defining the situation. Maya addressed Pierce with calm authority. "Sir, I recommend immediate lockdown and perimeter sweep. The individual tracking my movements is precise and dangerous. They will not hesitate." Pierce nodded. "Understood. All units execute." Blake's hands shook as he realized the full magnitude of his earlier arrogance. He had mocked her rank without understanding that Maya Cross was not merely a Marine. She was the operational fulcrum in a room filled with chaos, intelligence, and imminent danger. As the war room descended into controlled urgency, Maya reviewed the intel again, her mind racing through contingencies, identifying likely threats and calculating responses. Every scenario unfolded in her head as vividly as the one she had just survived in the field. Pierce glanced at her once, expression unreadable but tinged with respect. "Captain Cross, you weren't supposed to return here alive. And yet." Maya met his gaze with a quiet intensity. "Survival isn't luck, sir. It's preparation, experience, and focus." Blake could only nod, the weight of awe and fear pressing down. He understood now. Mocking her had been more than foolish. It had been reckless, almost fatal. The shadow outside the observation window moved again. Blake held his breath. Maya's gaze followed it without flinching. Pierce activated emergency lighting and tactical defenses, and the war room became a fortress. The tension was unbearable. Every second stretched, every sound amplified. Blake realized that the events unfolding were not just a lesson in humility, they were a trial by fire, and Captain Maya Cross was both the shield and the sword. And as the shadow paused once more, as the red warning lights flickered ominously, Blake understood a terrifying truth. The real battle wasn't behind her in the field. It was here now in the war room itself. The war room had become a stage of tension, so thick it felt like it could be sliced with a blade. Every officer present felt it, even those who had spent decades in operational command. The fluorescent lights flickered faintly, as though the building itself recognized the extraordinary presence of Captain Maya Cross. Blake remained frozen, pale, sweat beading on his forehead, while Pierce moved deliberately between the consoles, eyes scanning every incoming feed. "Show them everything," Pierce commanded quietly. The large monitor blinked and switched to the grainy bodycam footage from Maya's mission. Dust clouds hung in the air, partially obscuring jagged rocks and the flashes of gunfire. The camera wobbled with each step she took, but her focus was absolute. Every movement was deliberate, every action calculated. Blake couldn't look away. The first image was of the fortified compound she had infiltrated, a labyrinth of walls, towers, and armed guards. Even the drones had struggled to penetrate its perimeter. Yet there she was, crawling through the shadows like a ghost, a single figure against overwhelming odds. "Notice the angles," Maya said calmly, narrating the mission. "Every path I took was designed to avoid detection while keeping the objective in sight. One wrong move, one hesitation, and it would have been over." The feed shifted. Bullets tore through the ground around her, kicking up clouds of sand. Maya's breathing was heavy but controlled. Her eyes scanned constantly, evaluating every threat. Then the camera caught something Blake recognized instantly. Ramirez, one of his former squadmates, injured and unable to move. Blake's stomach tightened. "That's Ramirez." Maya didn't flinch. "He begged me to leave him behind. He said I should escape, complete the mission. I didn't hesitate." The footage showed her maneuvering under intense fire, dragging Ramirez across jagged terrain while returning fire when necessary. Each shot fired was precise, calculated. Every movement saved both her life and his. Blake's mouth went dry. He had mocked her earlier, assumed she was just another Marine. Now he realized she was operating on a level he couldn't comprehend. "She did all of that alone," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. Pierce's voice cut through the tension. "And yet this is just the beginning." The screen switched again, showing a series of intercepted communications and drone overlays. Enemy reinforcements were moving toward the valley, unaware their plans had been compromised. Maya had not only recovered the intelligence, she had disrupted an entire operation, buying critical time for Allied forces. Blake's disbelief was compounded by guilt. He had joked about her rank, assumed she was unremarkable. Now he saw the reality. Her decisions had saved countless lives. Every sarcastic remark he had made was meaningless in comparison to the stakes she had faced. Maya's voice remained steady. "Securing the intel wasn't enough. I had to extract it safely, neutralize threats, and ensure no compromise. The entire operation was a single thread. One wrong move and the fabric unraveled." Pierce's expression remained stoic, but his eyes betrayed admiration. "She planned for contingencies most officers don't even consider. Blake, this is why mocking her was not only foolish, it was dangerous." Blake swallowed hard, realizing for the first time that military hierarchy wasn't just about authority. It was about experience, precision, and the ability to make decisions under circumstances most would never endure. The footage shifted again. Maya and Ramirez reached a narrow ridge, enemy fire converging from both sides. She pressed him into a shadowed alcove, returning fire with surgical accuracy. Sparks flew as bullets struck stone near her head. The intensity of the moment was almost unbearable. "She did this under fire with a wounded soldier in tow," Blake muttered. Maya's voice cut through. "Every decision calculated, every risk measured. Adrenaline is a tool, not a crutch. Fear is a guide, not a barrier. The difference between survival and failure is focus." Blake's respect and fear deepened. He had thought he understood courage. Now he realized he had only glimpsed it through someone else's shadow. The feed then showed the extraction point. Maya had called in a covert pickup, authorized but heavily restricted. She navigated the terrain with Ramirez in tow, anticipating every threat, covering every angle. Explosions erupted nearby, yet she moved unflinchingly. Every officer in the war room leaned forward, tension stretching taut. Pierce broke the silence. "Notice the coordination. Even without direct support, she leveraged the environment, her training, and every tool at her disposal. That is mastery of the battlefield." Blake felt like a novice, a boy who had stumbled into an arena he was entirely unprepared for. The magnitude of her achievement and his ignorance hit him like a physical force. Maya's voice softened slightly as the footage continued. Ramirez was conscious, aware of the danger. I carried him because leaving him behind meant certain death, not just for him, but for the integrity of the mission. A single compromised life can destroy the intelligence chain. Blake's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. He could only watch, horrified and awed. Pierce tapped the console, bringing up a new set of footage, encrypted transmissions showing enemy communications intercepted by Maya. The enemy had been unaware she was inside their perimeter, blind to her movements, yet she had anticipated every contingency. Every patrol, every checkpoint, every reaction, they were all calculated into her path. Blake whispered, "She planned for everything, even the impossible." "Yes," Pierce replied, and yet she remained calm, alone, responsible for lives she could not afford to lose. Maya didn't look at Blake. Her eyes were on the tactical map, reviewing threats, analyzing potential leaks. "There's someone in this building who knows I was in the field," she said quietly. "If they act now, we risk exposure. The intel becomes compromised. Lives will be lost." Blake felt a chill. The war room, a place he had considered safe, was now a battlefield. Every joke, every casual remark, every moment he underestimated her had placed him in immediate danger. Pierce straightened. Security protocols, full lockdown, perimeter sweep, now. The room reacted instantly. Doors sealed. Emergency lighting flickered on. Surveillance cameras pivoted, scanning every corner. Officers moved with precision, the weight of urgency palpable. Maya's eyes caught a movement outside the observation window. A shadow flitted past, almost imperceptible, but she noticed. She drew her sidearm with the fluidity of someone who had rehearsed this movement hundreds of times in far worse conditions. Blake froze, fear gripping him. He realized the war room was no longer a command center. It was a potential death trap. Every step, every glance, every second counted. Pierce glanced at her. "They're here." Maya's voice was calm but lethal. "And they will not hesitate. Timing is everything. One misstep and we lose control." Blake felt the weight of his earlier arrogance press down like a physical force. He had mocked her rank, assumed she was ordinary, and now he faced the reality that Maya Cross was extraordinary, and that her presence alone could determine survival or death. The shadow outside moved again, pausing briefly as though testing the defenses. Maya's eyes narrowed. She spoke to Pierce, voice quiet but precise. "Sir, this individual has observed me. They know my patterns. We must act immediately or they will exploit the vulnerability." Pierce nodded, issuing rapid-fire commands. The war room became a hive of calculated activity. Officers moved with purpose, sealing entrances, monitoring all feeds, preparing for an intruder whose identity and intention was unknown. Blake's chest tightened. He understood now that the real mission had just begun. The battlefield was no longer in the desert valley. It was here, in the war room itself. Maya's gaze swept across the room, noting every exit, every officer's position, every potential threat. She was calm, focused, precise, the embodiment of control in chaos. Blake realized in that moment the full extent of his misjudgment. Mocking her rank had been reckless. Underestimating her skill had been dangerous. And now, facing the reality of her capabilities, he understood that Maya Cross wasn't just a Marine. She was the shield and the sword. The red warning lights pulsed ominously. The shadow moved again. Blake's hands clenched at his sides, realizing that the real battle, one he was wholly unprepared for, was about to begin. The war room had shifted from a place of strategy into a theater of imminent threat. The air was tense, every officer alert, every breath measured. Red warning lights pulsed against steel walls, illuminating the sweat and fear etched into faces. Outside the observation window, shadows moved, too precise, too controlled. Maya Cross stood in the center, calm, focused, calculating. She had survived ambushes, gunfire, and hostile terrain, but this room, every officer realized, was about to test her skills in a new way. Pierce turned toward Blake, who remained frozen, his hands trembling. "Sergeant, you need to understand something," the Admiral said, voice low, sharp, deliberate. "What you've just witnessed is not standard Marine operations. You've been in the dark about our actual role." Blake blinked, confused. What do you mean, sir?" Pierce gestured toward a sealed envelope resting on the console like a dangerous artifact. "Open it, carefully, and read. Only then will you understand the gravity of your situation." Blake hesitated, fingers shaking as he lifted the top flap. The envelope was thick, dense with classified documentation. Every label screamed warning: top secret, eyes only, redacted division. Blake had handled classified materials before, but none carried the weight of life-and-death secrecy like this. He unfolded the first page, his eyes widened. He reread the words, unable to believe what he saw. "Captain Cross," he muttered, his voice catching. She's. Pierce's expression was unreadable, his eyes cold steel. "She's a Tier 1 special mission operator. Classified redacted division. She outranks everyone in this room in operational authority, including me, when executing field orders classified above standard military protocol." Blake's jaw dropped. He felt like the floor had disappeared beneath him. This isn't real," he whispered. She outranks all of us. Why didn't we know?" Pierce's eyes narrowed. "Because she isn't supposed to exist. Her identity, her missions, her operations, all of it is classified beyond normal channels. She operates under deep cover. Her actions, her teams, real or constructed, are denied in all official records. Any public acknowledgement could compromise lives, missions, and even national security." Blake's mind reeled. Every sarcastic joke he had made about Maya, every attempt to belittle her in the war room, now felt absurd, dangerous, almost criminal in hindsight. Maya didn't speak. She simply observed Blake, her expression calm yet filled with the intensity of someone who had faced far worse than a room full of disbelieving Marines. Pierce leaned back, voice low. "Blake, this isn't a matter of ego. It's a matter of survival for her, for the mission, for everyone in this room. You made a mistake earlier. Now your mistake has consequences." Blake swallowed hard, the weight of shame and fear pressing down like a boulder. "Sir, I didn't know. I never." Words failed him. He couldn't convey the horror, the disbelief, the awe that coursed through him. Maya finally spoke, voice quiet but lethal. "Sergeant, the moment you judged me, you placed yourself in danger. Not by what I do, but by what you fail to understand. Awareness and respect aren't optional in situations like this. They're the difference between life and death." Blake's hands shook. I understand now, ma'am. I see that. I see it all." Pierce nodded. "Good. Understanding is the first step. Acting correctly is the second." Maya stepped toward the tactical console, tapping commands with precision. "The individual tracking my movements is inside this building. They've already observed every detail. If we delay, they will act. Security is compromised." Blake realized fully the gravity of the situation. The war room, he had assumed it was safe, a controlled environment, was now a trap. Every exit could be exploited, every officer observed. And Maya alone was the only person capable of neutralizing the threat. Pierce activated the lockdown protocols fully. Doors sealed with heavy hydraulic force. Emergency lighting flooded the room, casting deep shadows that flickered with the movement of officers preparing for conflict. Maya studied the floor plan on the console. "There's a path they've chosen, predictable. They think I won't anticipate it, but I already have." Blake leaned in, heart pounding. You can see them already." "Yes," she replied without turning. "And we have very little time. One misstep in this building becomes a death trap. I will not allow it." Pierce gestured to a nearby security officer. Deploy countermeasures, prepare containment protocols, and Sergeant Blake, follow her instructions without question. Blake swallowed hard, realizing that he had never truly followed anyone's lead, not like this, not with stakes this high. Every sarcastic comment, every attempt at humor had been replaced with urgency and obedience. Maya tapped another command and the main monitors displayed a series of thermal feeds. Shadows moved across the perimeter, figures too deliberate, too coordinated. They are already inside the outer perimeter, she said. We have minutes, possibly seconds. Blake felt a cold sweat run down his spine. He had seen danger before, but never like this. Never calculated, never precise. Every instinct screamed that the enemy was not only skilled but prepared for her. Pierce's hand hovered over the intercom, ready to mobilize emergency teams. "Captain, are we prepared for a direct engagement?" Maya didn't answer immediately. Her gaze swept the room. Every officer's position, every monitor, every piece of tactical equipment, she assessed it all in milliseconds. Finally, she spoke. "We are prepared, but they will not expect the counter. That is our advantage. They will act under assumption of control. We will use that against them." Blake's jaw tightened. You're already predicting their movements." "Yes," Maya said calmly. "Every operator leaves traces. Every calculation has a pattern. They think I am alone. That is the only mistake they will make." Pierce stepped closer, voice low. "Captain, I want you to brief Blake on operational roles. He will assist you. Failure is not an option." Maya nodded. "Sergeant, pay attention. The individual is trained. Their objective is extraction of classified intel and elimination of witnesses. You are the shield. I am the spear. Every movement you make is critical. Any hesitation, any mistake will cost lives." Blake's breathing was ragged. He nodded, understanding finally the stakes. This was no training exercise. This was no mission with safety nets. This was survival, intelligence, and operational execution at the highest level. Pierce gestured at the monitors again. "Captain Cross, security cameras indicate movement near the northern corridor. This is where they will likely attempt entry." Maya's eyes narrowed. "Agreed. Set defensive positions and create diversions. Make it appear they have the advantage. We will counterstrike from concealed positions." Blake felt his stomach tighten. Every sarcastic comment, every underestimation had been erased in a moment of terrifying clarity. Maya Cross was no ordinary Marine. She was a classified weapon, trained, lethal, and capable of strategy beyond comprehension. Suddenly, a low warning tone sounded across the consoles. The shadow they had observed outside the observation window shifted. Maya's gaze tracked it instantly. "They are moving," she said. "Pierce, now, begin perimeter lockdown." Hydraulic doors slammed shut. Alarms echoed. Every officer braced. Blake realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. The combination of training, instinct, intelligence, and raw courage radiating from Maya Cross was almost too much to comprehend. Pierce's voice was calm but edged with urgency. "Captain, we are locked down. All entry points secured. Proceed as necessary." Maya nodded. "Good, Blake, follow my lead. Step where I indicate, cover the windows, observe patterns, anticipate movement, fail not in awareness." Blake swallowed, feeling the weight of responsibility crush his prior arrogance. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. Maya glanced at the holographic display, taking in every shadow, every route, every potential threat vector. She moved with precision, her mind mapping 100 possibilities in seconds. Every officer in the room understood in that moment that she was not only a Marine, they were witnessing a force that could alter the outcome of any engagement. Blake realized fully what he had ignored before. Maya Cross wasn't just a Marine. She was the mission. She was the strategy. She was the authority. And now, anyone who doubted her, himself included, would understand exactly why mocking her rank had been the gravest mistake of their lives. The shadow shifted again. Red warning lights cast its elongated figure across the observation window. Blake's heart raced. Every second stretched into an eternity. Maya's calm demeanor contrasted the storm of tension surrounding her. She was poised, lethal, and ready. And as the shadow paused, too deliberate, too calculated, the war room held its breath. The real test had begun. The war room had become a silent storm. Every officer, every Marine, and every analyst present felt the weight of the imminent threat pressing down like an invisible hand. The red emergency lights flickered intermittently, casting angular shadows that stretched unnaturally across consoles, walls, and the officers frozen in anticipation. Outside, a shadow moved with deliberate caution, a predator testing its prey. Inside, Captain Maya Cross was every bit the apex predator in a room that suddenly felt like a battlefield. Blake, still pale and shaken, clutched the console in front of him, trying to focus. Every sarcastic remark he had made earlier, every dismissive joke about Maya's rank and ability, felt like a stone dragging him down into a pit of regret. He was no longer an observer. He was now a participant in a high-stakes operation he didn't understand and had no right to question. Maya's eyes scanned the monitors, noting every camera feed, every shadow, every anomaly. She moved like water, precise, deliberate, almost silent, with the kind of confidence that only comes from surviving situations where death is always one misstep away. "Sergeant Blake," she said, her voice quiet but commanding, "listen carefully. The individual outside the observation window is skilled, trained, and dangerous. Do not engage unless instructed. Your role is to monitor, observe, and relay. Any deviation could compromise your life and the mission." Blake nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, ma'am," he whispered. His fingers trembled as he adjusted the camera feeds, eyes darting between the monitors and the shifting shadow outside. Pierre stepped closer to Maya, his usual stoicism tempered with respect. "Captain, do you require additional personnel?" "No," Maya replied, her voice calm, unwavering. "Too many participants reduce control. We need precision, not numbers. This is not about brute force. It is about timing, anticipation, and exploitation of predictable behavior." The shadow outside paused at the edge of the window, its movements deliberate, calculating. Maya's gaze followed it with absolute focus. "They're probing," she said quietly, "testing our reactions, our boundaries. They believe I will act predictably. That is their mistake." Blake's pulse raced. "And you're going to counter it?" "Yes," Maya replied. "I will create a scenario where they expose themselves. Every movement, every step they take is under my observation. The moment they commit, we neutralize." Pierce observed her with an intensity Blake had never seen. "You've done this before." Maya's expression didn't change. "Many times. Not like this in this room, but operationally, yes. Situations where surveillance is constant, enemies are unpredictable, and stakes are life or death are common in my line of work. I adapt. I survive. I succeed." Blake swallowed again, his fear mingling with awe. I had no idea." "You didn't need to," Maya said, "until now." Suddenly, a faint sound, the barely perceptible click of a door hinge, echoed across the war room. The shadow shifted. Maya's eyes snapped to it instantly. She didn't panic, she assessed. She calculated, she predicted. "Move to your stations," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Focus on every feed. Do not lose track of their position. Any lapse and we lose control." Blake obeyed, though every step felt heavy, loaded with the weight of consequences he couldn't yet comprehend. He positioned himself near a console that allowed him to monitor the shadow's movements while observing Maya's tactical directives. Every nerve in his body screamed at him, yet he dared not flinch. Maya crouched slightly, adjusting the holographic display of the war room. She traced possible paths the infiltrator could take, predicting behavior based on patterns only a trained operative could discern. They will move along the northern corridor first. Expect diversion. Expect misdirection. They are counting on overreaction. Do not give them that advantage. Blake felt his stomach tighten. Diversion. Misdirection. The words made the situation sound like a chess match with deadly consequences. He realized she wasn't just defending a room, she was orchestrating an intricate trap, bending the environment to her advantage. Pierce's voice was calm but urgent. "Captain, perimeter checks indicate they've breached the first internal zone. No visual confirmation yet." Maya's eyes didn't waver from the monitors. "I see them. Thermal readings indicate their approach. I'm ready." Blake watched her in awe. Every movement, every glance, every breath was precise. She was in complete control. And yet, the tension radiating from her was real. He could see it in the subtle tightening of her jaw, the minute narrowing of her eyes, the slight flexing of her fingers over her sidearm. The shadow moved again, testing the room's defenses. Blake's pulse thundered in his ears. He wanted to speak, to give a warning, but Maya's calm voice halted him. "Not yet. Wait, observe, relay." Seconds stretched into an eternity. Then the shadow paused near a blind spot, an angle Maya had anticipated. She leaned forward slightly, tapping a few commands. Security protocols activated silently. Doors locked, countermeasures readied, and lights adjusted to manipulate perception. "They're coming," she said quietly. "Be ready to act on my signal. Timing is everything." Blake's hands trembled over the console. He had trained for alerts, drills, exercises, but nothing prepared him for this. The real-time, immediate threat in a room full of people who depended entirely on Maya's expertise. The shadow shifted, advancing cautiously. Maya's eyes tracked every micro-movement. "Now," she commanded softly. From concealed positions within the room, non-lethal countermeasures deployed. Security barriers engaged, blocking the shadow's intended path. The figure froze, momentarily caught in the trap Maya had predicted. Blake felt a surge of adrenaline. He realized fully the magnitude of what he was witnessing. Maya Cross had anticipated the intruder's behavior, manipulated the environment, and gained the tactical advantage, all before a single shot was fired. The intruder hesitated, then moved along another path. Maya adjusted instantly, redirecting defensive measures, forcing the shadow into a corridor of her choosing. Every action she took was calculated, deliberate, and lethal in consequence if misjudged. Blake whispered to himself, "She's controlling everything." Pierce's voice was steady but filled with tension. "Captain, report on status." "They're contained," Maya said. "Engagement is imminent, but the advantage is ours. Every step they take is within calculated parameters. They are predictable. We are ready." Blake's chest tightened. He had mocked her, assumed she was ordinary, and now faced the reality of her extraordinary capability. Every officer, every analyst, every Marine in the war room was following her lead, not out of hierarchy, but out of necessity. Maya's gaze swept across the room, ensuring all personnel were in position. Her fingers hovered over her sidearm, ready to act. Every muscle in her body was poised, ready to respond instantly. She was calm, lethal, and completely in control. The shadow moved again, pausing at the junction of two corridors. Blake's stomach lurched. Maya's eyes narrowed. "Commit," she whispered. "They must commit." A faint sound, metal scraping against steel, echoed down the corridor. The intruder had taken the bait. Maya's eyes sharpened. She tapped commands, and the war room's defensive measures adjusted silently, locking the intruder into a predictable path. Blake realized fully that the situation was now irreversible. Every movement, every decision, every breath depended on Maya's precision. One false step, one hesitation, and the consequences would be catastrophic. Maya took a slow, controlled breath, eyes unwavering. "Engage," she said. And in that instant, the war room became a battlefield once again, silent, deadly, and orchestrated by a woman whose presence alone commanded survival. The war room had become a tense arena, the calm before a storm that promised chaos the moment Maya Cross gave the signal. The shadow outside the observation window paused, indecision flickering across its deliberate movements. Every officer in the room was frozen, eyes trained on the monitors, hearts pounding with the knowledge that any misstep could have immediate consequences. Blake's nerves were raw, his earlier arrogance now replaced by fear and awe. Maya's eyes followed the intruder like a predator watching its prey, calculating every movement. "They've committed," she whispered, her voice quiet but ice-cold. "Engage now." Security measures deployed seamlessly. Hydraulic doors sealed potential exit points. Automated countermeasures activated along the northern corridor. Every path the intruder could take was now under Maya's control. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. Her presence radiated lethal precision. The shadow moved again, attempting to circumvent the barriers. Maya anticipated the maneuver, adjusting the room's environmental controls. Lights shifted subtly, shadows manipulated, every corner surveilled by thermal cameras and motion sensors. The intruder paused, trapped in a corridor designed by Maya herself. Blake's jaw tightened. He watched in disbelief as she executed her plan, each action deliberate, fluid, and devastatingly efficient. "I can't. She's controlling everything," he whispered. Pierce's voice was steady, though tension laced his words. "Captain, report on containment." "They're trapped," Maya replied, her gaze never leaving the monitors. "I've isolated their path. They are predictable. One wrong move and we neutralize." The intruder's figure shifted, a glint of movement visible in thermal feed. Maya's hand rested lightly on her sidearm. Her eyes narrowed, calculating distance, angles, and timing. "Precision," she muttered. "Every step, every decision must be perfect." Blake felt the weight of her words. He realized fully that this was not a drill, not a simulation, not an exercise. Every calculation, every action could mean life or death, for her, for him, for everyone in the room. The intruder lunged toward a breach point. Maya anticipated it instantly. She tapped a command, and a silent mechanical trap engaged, restricting movement and forcing the intruder into a controlled space. Thermal sensors lit up, tracking the intruder's every movement. "Target contained," Maya said calmly. Her voice betrayed nothing, yet Blake could see the intensity in her eyes. "Prepare for engagement." Blake's hands shook as he monitored the feed. He had never witnessed such control, such mastery. The intruder was skilled, there was no doubt, but Maya's anticipation, her ability to manipulate the environment, left the enemy with no options. Pierce spoke quietly to Blake. "Observe. This is why mocking her rank was not just foolish, it was reckless. She doesn't just lead, she commands outcomes, controls variables, and anticipates threats beyond conventional understanding." The intruder attempted a sudden move, a diversion to break free. Maya's response was immediate. With a swift, precise command, automated defenses sealed potential escape points. The intruder faltered, caught entirely in the net of her planning. Blake's pulse raced. He realized that Maya's authority wasn't just about rank. It was about understanding, experience, and absolute command of both environment and situation. "Engaging now," Maya announced. She moved fluidly across the room, every step deliberate. Her presence was magnetic, demanding attention without raising her voice. She activated a non-lethal immobilization device with precision, disabling the intruder's movement instantly. The shadow crumpled, trapped without a sound, caught completely by her design. Blake exhaled shakily. The danger was neutralized, yet the war room remained tense. The threat was contained, but the room was still a battlefield, the officers aware that any miscalculation could reignite chaos. Pierce stepped closer to Maya, nodding in approval. Exceptional execution, Captain. You controlled the environment, anticipated the threat, and neutralized it without a single casualty. This is operational mastery at its highest level. Maya glanced at Blake, her expression calm but piercing. "Sergeant Blake," she said, her voice precise, "did you understand the difference between arrogance and awareness?" Blake swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am, I understand now. I had no idea." Maya's gaze softened slightly, but the intensity remained. "Understanding isn't enough. You must internalize it. Respect, observation, and precision save lives. Jokes and arrogance endanger them." Blake nodded, feeling the enormity of his earlier mistakes. He had mocked her rank, belittled her capability, and now faced the stark reality of her authority, skill, and courage. Every lesson, every mission she had undertaken, every calculated risk she had taken was a testament to her extraordinary capability. Pierce addressed the room. Everyone witnessed what just occurred. Let this be a lesson. Captain Cross operates beyond conventional command structures. Her authority, skill, and judgment are absolute when it comes to operational security and survival. The officers absorbed the lesson in stunned silence. Blake felt the shame and relief of survival coexisting in a chaotic swirl of emotion. He realized fully that he had been lucky to witness her skill, lucky to survive, lucky that her precision had spared everyone from harm. Maya turned back to the tactical console. The intruder is restrained, but questions remain. Who provided access? How did they anticipate the layout? We neutralized the immediate threat, but the source is still unknown. Blake's pulse quickened again. The danger was not fully gone. Maya's eyes narrowed as she considered every angle. "Pierce, we need internal sweep and interrogation protocols. Identify the breach. Confirm security of all systems. We act swiftly, or this room becomes vulnerable again." Pierce nodded, issuing rapid commands. Officers moved with precision, performing a coordinated sweep of the room, checking every access point, every hidden route, every blind spot. Blake observed Maya, understanding for the first time why she commanded respect. Her presence wasn't about authority. It was about competence, experience, and lethal clarity of thought. She had orchestrated a trap, neutralized a threat, and maintained complete control, all while remaining calm and composed. The intruder, restrained but conscious, was brought into the war room. Maya approached, her posture commanding. "You assumed control," she said quietly. "You underestimated your environment, your opponent, and your own vulnerability. Explain yourself." The intruder hesitated, eyes darting between Maya and Pierce. Fear was evident. Maya's reputation, her authority, her skill, they were undeniable. Even the enemy could sense it. Blake watched, silent, absorbing every detail. He realized fully that Maya Cross wasn't just a Marine. She was strategy, precision, and lethal skill personified. And now, the war room understood exactly why mocking her rank had been a fatal mistake. Maya turned back to Pierce. "Secure the room, interrogate for intel, determine the source. We proceed only when full control is regained." Pierce nodded. "Understood, Captain Cross, your execution was flawless." Maya's gaze swept the war room one final time. "This is not the end," she said quietly. "Threats evolve, but so do we. Awareness, precision, and respect will always be our shield." Blake exhaled shakily, the lesson etched into his mind forever. He had seen her skill, witnessed her command, and understood fully the stakes of underestimating her. He had mocked a Marine, and now he realized she was the definition of authority, courage, and lethal capability. The war room had survived the immediate threat, but everyone understood the truth. Captain Maya Cross was more than a Marine. She was a force of precision and strategy, untouchable in skill and lethal in execution. And Blake would never forget it. The war room, once a hub of strategy and command, now felt almost sacred. A battlefield that had been conquered not through sheer numbers or firepower, but through precision, calculation, and the unmatched skill of a single Marine. Captain Maya Cross stood at the center, her presence calm, unyielding, a living testament to the power of experience and authority. Blake leaned against a console, his hands still trembling. He had witnessed bravery, intellect, and lethal skill in a way he had never imagined. Every sarcastic remark, every belittling joke he had made earlier, now seemed like folly. The weight of shame and awe pressed down on him. Pierce approached Maya, the usual rigidness of a high-ranking admiral softened with a profound respect. "Captain Cross," he said quietly, his eyes never leaving her. "The intruder has been secured, the perimeter is fully reinforced, and all classified intel remains uncompromised. Your execution was flawless. I am compelled to acknowledge it formally." Maya turned her gaze toward him, her expression measured, calm. "Sir, the operation was successful because preparation and execution were synchronized. Formal acknowledgement is secondary to survival and mission integrity." Pierce's jaw tightened. He had observed many missions, led countless operations, but nothing had prepared him for the level of authority and control Maya had exhibited. He straightened, voice carrying the weight of command and reverence. "Captain Cross, in recognition of your unparalleled skill, leadership, and decisive execution under immediate threat, I am." He paused. The war room, heavy with tension and relief, seemed to hold its collective breath. Every officer present sensed the gravity of the moment. Even Blake, pale and wide-eyed, understood that this was no ceremonial gesture. It was a profound acknowledgement of absolute mastery. Pierce lifted his hand in the crisp motion of a salute. The room's ambient tension intensified as every eye followed the motion. He stepped toward Maya, unwavering in his posture, the formality of the salute matched by an unmistakable undercurrent of respect that words could never convey. Maya, for the first time, allowed a small shift in posture. She returned the salute, not out of obligation but with mutual acknowledgement of skill, authority, and command. The room seemed to exhale collectively. It was more than a gesture. It was validation, recognition of a force that existed above and beyond conventional hierarchy. Blake's eyes widened. He could scarcely comprehend the significance. He had joked about her rank, belittled her authority, and yet here was an admiral, the highest-ranking officer in the room, acknowledging her skill publicly and unequivocally. It was a lesson in humility, respect, and the true meaning of leadership. Pierce lowered his salute, his eyes still locked on Maya. "The war room, the personnel within, and the success of this mission are indebted to your actions, Captain. You are a standard of excellence beyond comprehension." Maya's gaze swept across the room. Her expression remained calm, but the intensity behind her eyes told a story of experience, sacrifice, and countless missions carried out with precision and courage. "Sir, the mission's success is a reflection of coordinated effort. Authority is only as strong as the ability to act decisively when required." Blake exhaled shakily, realizing that he had spent hours in the presence of a Marine whose skill, courage, and tactical brilliance were beyond measure. He had mocked her. He had underestimated her. And now he understood that Maya Cross was not simply a Marine. She was a strategic force, a living embodiment of leadership and operational mastery. Pierce turned to the assembled officers. "Let this operation be recorded in classified files as a case study in operational excellence. Captain Cross has demonstrated precision, foresight, and authority that transcends conventional understanding. Every officer present should internalize this lesson." Blake felt the weight of his earlier arrogance lift slightly, replaced by a deep reverence. "Ma'am," he said quietly, stepping forward, I owe you an apology. I underestimated you, mocked your rank, and failed to recognize your capability. I see now, I understand completely." Maya regarded him with steady eyes. Acknowledgement is the first step. Understanding is the second. Application, the ability to act with awareness, respect, and precision, is the final measure of competence. Learn it well, Sergeant Blake. Lives depend on it. Blake swallowed hard, the lesson etched into him permanently. He had witnessed courage, skill, and precision that were almost superhuman, and he realized fully that rank was not merely a title. It was authority earned through experience, decision-making under pressure, and the ability to survive and succeed where others would fail. The room remained tense for a moment longer, the red warning lights fading into standard illumination. The intruder had been neutralized, the breach contained, and the war room secured. Yet the impact of what had transpired lingered, an invisible imprint of skill, courage, and authority that no officer would forget. Pierce stepped closer to Maya once more. "Captain, on behalf of every officer present, and in recognition of your extraordinary actions, I salute you." Maya returned the salute with precision, calm, and absolute authority. It was a moment that transcended ceremony. It was acknowledgement of skill, respect earned through action, and validation of authority earned in the crucible of danger. Blake watched, mesmerized. He realized fully that he had not merely witnessed heroism, he had witnessed mastery, and he understood, finally, why mocking her rank had been not only foolish but dangerous. The war room slowly returned to controlled order. Officers resumed their stations, security checks were finalized, and emergency protocols were confirmed. Yet the atmosphere had changed permanently. Every officer, every Marine, and every analyst present carried the memory of Captain Maya Cross, the Marine who had acted decisively, anticipated every threat, and controlled a battlefield that extended beyond conventional understanding. Blake stepped back, feeling both awe and humility. I will never underestimate you again," he whispered, voice low but sincere. Maya's gaze met his, steady and unwavering. "See it, understand it, internalize it, and act accordingly. That is the measure of true service." Pierce finally broke the silence, his tone authoritative yet reverent. "Captain Cross, mission accomplished. You've set a new standard, one that will be remembered in the highest echelons of command." Maya nodded, voice calm but firm. "Sir, the mission is only as complete as the next step of vigilance. Threats evolve, so must we." Blake's eyes lingered on her, understanding fully that this Marine was not merely an officer. She was a force of strategy, skill, and precision that transcended rank, titles, and conventional expectation. He had mocked her. He had doubted her. And now he realized that Captain Maya Cross was untouchable in her expertise, commanding respect through action, courage, and unwavering authority. The war room had survived the threat, the intruder neutralized, and the mission secure. But more importantly, every officer had learned an invaluable lesson. Rank is earned through action, respect is gained through precision, and mastery is proven in moments of life-or-death decision. Pierce's final words resonated through the room. "Captain Maya Cross, you have shown us all what true authority looks like. We are honored to witness your command." And with that, the Admiral saluted her one last time. The room held its breath, a moment suspended between awe and relief. Maya returned the salute, steady, precise, and absolute. In that moment, every officer, every Marine, and every analyst present understood fully. They had witnessed greatness. Blake exhaled slowly, the lessons imprinted forever. He would never forget this day, this Marine, or the power of respect, awareness, and authority earned through courage and mastery. The war room had survived. The intruder had been contained. And Captain Maya Cross had secured her place, not only as a Marine, but as a legend whose skill and authority transcended every expectation. The end.